Hey everybody, this is Mark, and welcome back to Beyond Profit, a global perspective. And today we're going to talk about making a global business plan. Now, if you've been following this channel, you'll know that I've got a series of videos that address sections of a global business plan. And whether you watch this video first or last or both, really up to you. I think there's probably benefit in starting and ending with it. So what I'm going to do is go through the basic elements of a business plan, like what do you want to have included in that, but just really kind of from a really high level. And we're not going to get into massive details, but just what kinds of sections do you need and what kinds of things really belong in those sections. If you want to learn more about what belongs in those sections in detail, that is what those other videos are for. So start here, and then go through and learn about those other things. If you need some additional knowledge, it's a good place to go. And then I would say, once you're done, you've put everything together, and come back to this video again. Make sure you got everything. And if you've got any questions, then maybe this will address a few things for you. So anyway, let's do this. If you're getting a lot out of these videos, I would like to invite you to please like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with other people. I'm all about trying to help people out when it comes to all this business stuff. So if you find this helpful, tell people about it. And in fact, if you want to come study with me here at the University of St. Mary, I'd encourage you to enroll. I would love to work with you, so come on over. As I mentioned before, the purpose of this video is to learn how to write a business plan, specifically a global business plan. So what I'm going to start is by sharing an outline. This outline contains all of the elements that I think are important when I'm reviewing global business plans. You may get other information elsewhere. This isn't a definitive way to necessarily do it. I think it's really good because it came from people who actually do this for a living, consultants and people like that who work to move businesses overseas. So as I said, there's other ways to do it, but I think this is a really reliable and consistent way to pull it off. So what I'm going to do is list the different sections of the global business plan. I'll talk a little bit about a few of them just to put things in context, but most of my discussion really is going to be after this introduction. We're going to go into some depth on some of them. And then if you want some real depth, there are some other videos that I've shared on many of these different subject areas. So if you want to know how to write, for example, an entry strategy or to write the marketing strategy of a global business plan, there's a video that's set aside just for that part. So hopefully that will help you out. So let's start with the executive summary. An executive summary is the first thing. It's the thing that's at the front of the report, but it actually is the last thing that you should write. So in other words, you should write everything else in the report first, and then write that, and then put it at the front. Why? Well, because it's literally a summary. The idea is to tell an executive, somebody who maybe doesn't have time to read the whole thing, or maybe wants to know what's in it so that they know whether or not they should read it, right? In a page or two, it's going to tell them in summary all of the stuff that's in there that's important. So you won't know what that is. You won't know what's important until the actual report is written. So like I said, it is the last thing you do. And so in just a few minutes when I'm done giving you this introduction, then I will go into some more detail about that executive summary, and there's a separate video on that as well. So the next three, introduction, initial research, and comparative analysis, I want to talk about just a little bit before we get to sections where I elaborate a bit more after this introduction. So all three of these sections really are based on research that you need to do, that some of which really isn't going to make it to this final version, to this business plan that you're putting together. So what is it that you're looking for? What do you need to do? Well, in an introduction, you're going to include the company mission, vision, rationale. So all of that stuff is stuff that you need to figure out before you write this version of a plan, right? That's your background research, right? The goal of your background research really is to figure out which company you're going to focus on, which maybe you already know what that is. Maybe it's your company that you own or one that you work for. So maybe that's pretty obvious. But the other thing that you're looking to do is try to figure out, where are you going? Generally speaking, what country are you going into? But eventually you'll be able to specify that further. So the introduction is going to give you the company mission, vision, rationale for expansion. With the initial research, you're going to be looking at a few regions in the world, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but you're going to have to sort of look at, I would recommend 3 regions, and then sort it down to just one. And then once you've chosen that region, then your next step is to focus on 3 countries in that region that would be suitable for expansion. And then that's where you get into the comparative analysis. You will look at 3 countries, and then you'll try to figure out, based on the analysis here, which one is going to be the best. And so again, there's a video on how to do a decision matrix so you can do this comparative analysis. There are videos on the PESTLE and cultural exchange rates, all that stuff. So again, that'll show you how to do the research and how to set it up. But those are all things that you need to have done before you even get into this business plan, because those 3 sections are things that are reliant upon that information. And then once you have that, once you've figured that out, then yes, you're going to talk about it a little bit in your report, but a lot of it is stuff that's just, it goes by the wayside because it's stuff you don't need anymore, right? You have to sort of do all of that research and maybe not include everything in the plan. So I'll elaborate on that a little bit when we get to that point of the outline. We've got an executive summary, an introduction, some initial research, comparative analysis, right? And then we go on to entry strategy, cultural implications, marketing strategy, the HR and personnel plan, the financial plan, the export-import or EXIM strategy and supply chain issues, ethics, sustainability, and corporate social responsibility, a conclusion with final recommendation, and then works cited. So as I said before, we're going to look at each one in turn and then use that to sort of explain what it is that you need to write about in each of those sections. How many of you have ever written an executive summary for a report before? To kind of give you a bullet point of the things to include, right? First, you do need a brief statement of purpose, right? Hopefully that's obvious, but I have seen some executive summaries where you just sort of like jump in and you just start listing things, right? You should say, the purpose of this report is to, move this company into this place, right? So it's kind of like a thesis statement. You need something like that in there. The necessary background information, and keep in mind, I have in italics, necessary, right? You don't want a lot of background information. Anything that is really background, most of it, they should be able to go into the report and go and find. So if you have to share something in order for something else to make sense, then definitely include it, right? But only as necessary. You need a concise analysis, a summary of the most important parts of the plan. You will not get to share everything in those first couple of pages. Think about it in a way as sort of like a pitch. You have to be selective. Like, what kinds of things do you think your boss needs in order for them to make a decision about whether to greenlight this project? And you just stick it there as a summary in those first couple of pages. And finally, right, what did you discover? What are your recommendations? So I should be able to look at the end of an executive summary and say, all right, they think we should greenlight this project and move this company into this country. Or maybe they don't greenlight the project. Maybe they've done all this research and after all, it's not maybe the best plan in the world. Or maybe, it will only work if X, Y, and Z happens. Something that you think is going to be a key selling point. Something that's going to make a recommendation so somebody's going to kind of know where to go with that, what to do with that. That's what you need to conclude with. So after your executive summary, then you should have an introduction. It should be an overview of the company, mission, vision, rationale for expansion. It should be short. It should focus on the rationale. So this is not a place for you to wax eloquent about your business. Okay, you don't have to say, wow, Scooter's Coffee is the best coffee ever, right? And wow, come to our store, right? You're talking to your boss or you're talking to a financier. We know Scooter's is a successful company. This is not an advertisement or a commercial. You want just enough information to know that, we're documenting success. We're not selling, it's just like, it's here. And why are we doing this? Why is it a good idea to make this happen? So there's no mysteries. Up front, you're making it clear what it is that you're trying to do. We don't expect them to know everything about moving that business to wherever it is you want to go. Include what you think is crucial. What's really important to fit into a brief introduction that justifies your purpose. In the next section, it's important that you do some initial research. Your first steps in a business plan, you're kind of putting together an initial proposal. You're deciding what company am I doing and what region am I taking it into. And then after that, you're doing this sort of decision matrix, PESTLE analysis, cultural analysis thing, and you're choosing a region and looking at 3 countries in those regions, primarily focusing on region. It's not enough that you just, I think, pick a country or pick a city. Eventually you want to go there and you want to get there with that level of specificity. But for now, you're best off looking at regions, right? By looking at where does your industry operate? What kinds of connections do they have? What infrastructure supports what you're doing? What connections support what you're doing, right? Is there an optimal place in the world for you to go to? And so really, I think that's the first thing you need to look at. Doing some regional analysis and comparing. For example, maybe you want your business to go someplace in Eastern Europe, but then you're thinking, hey, maybe the Middle East would be better, or maybe someplace in Southeast Asia. At that point, think about how your industry relates to those different regions. Are there already players there? Are there not players there? Is there an opportunity to be a first or a second mover in that area? So looking at the competitive market by region is a good place to start. By the time you're done with this process, you should be nailing it down to one region. So this covers the regions that you're considering, right? So briefly review the regions you considered and why you ultimately came to a decision on your region. It doesn't have to be super long, right? Maybe a paragraph, a few sentences, whatever, right? But why did we get to this region and not these others? And then we get into a comparative analysis. On this comparative analysis, remember, we have a video. We've got several videos, actually. There's a video on a PESTLE analysis. There's a video on cultural analysis. Several videos on exchange rates and currency policy. So all of these things will help you figure out what you might need as far as putting together that component of the plan. The decision matrix is the spreadsheet that you use, right? The PESTLE is like the first 6 items you've got on there, the PESTLE, right? And then you've got the section on culture, and then you've got the section on currency, okay, right? But the whole thing is the decision matrix. Okay. So all of those variables you use to make a decision, and the decision matrix is the tool that you use. By the time you get to the decision matrix, then you should already know what region you're ready to move into, and at that point you can compare 3 countries within that region. You don't need most of that stuff for your final report. That's research that you did in order to actually do the business plan. So you are getting rid of the extraneous details on those other countries you did not choose. You are focusing on the country you did choose. You probably should have a paragraph in there at some point saying, okay, well, I was thinking about Turkey and Egypt and Algeria, and here's the reason why Egypt and Turkey didn't do as well as, whatever. And so you should have some analysis in there that briefly talks about what you did with your PESTLE analysis, how it is that you came up with the one. But at that point, you're really focusing on the advantages of the place you're going, right? And the key question, as it always is, I know I probably sound like a broken record when I say this, right? But the key question always is, what is relevant as far as your business moving into that country, right? Include that information that makes a case that This is what I need to know in order to go there, how it's going to be successful, stuff that's going to be relevant at that level. So we look at the different things that you did, right? You did a PESTLE analysis, explain the numbers primarily on your country. You can draw some contrast with the others, but you're not looking for data on those other countries. Cultural analysis, focus on Hofstede. Any additional cultural analysis you might have done, you can certainly include that too, focusing on your country. Exchange rates and currency policy. And then conclude this section with sort of a competitive survey and country selection, right? Why did you pick this country over the other two? Using the weighted decision matrix table for a reference in order to weigh that risk. Entry strategy. This is probably pretty straightforward. With entry strategy, you're going to want to say your mode of entry, right? Am I exporting? Is this a franchise? Is it a greenfield investment? A joint venture? What am I doing? And then this also is an opportunity for you to talk about the legal structure of the business, the relationship between the expansion business and the parent organization, describe and document all the legal requirements necessary to make an expansion into the target country, right? Now, that may exclude a few things. For example, there are legalities that are involved in HR that probably belong in the HR section, right? But here we're talking about, how are you going to make that entry? Strategy. Again, I have a video on that. You might want to look into that. That will give you what the different options are for entry strategies, just to figure out what's the best way for your company to enter that country. Cultural implications, right? I've got several videos on culture, some of which I think would be very helpful to you. So you might want to check that out. The assumption is that a lot of this cultural stuff may apply to your marketing and your HR section. They may be broad questions about what's happening in the culture that might help you understand how to sell to people, how that market works, how you treat employees, and so on. And so some of that stuff may end up in this overview section. I would say if there's cultural implications that have more of a direct bearing on marketing or HR, it should probably belong in those sections, right? But the sort of general overarching cultural stuff that you came up with, this would be a good place to include it. And you don't have to be redundant. Like if there's some things that you included, say, in your previous section when you're talking about like the Hofstede stuff, you don't have to go through Hofstede stuff twice, right? But there are some things sometimes that I think fit better in this kind of a section that helps you understand more broadly what it means to do business in that country. Next is marketing strategy. Okay, so we have two pieces of this, right? One, we have a marketing plan. And so it says design a marketing strategy, takes into consideration the consumer behavior of the target country, how it relates to local culture, identify your primary target market customer, and explain how you will reach that market. Check out the video. That marketing video, I think, does a really good job of explaining how you should structure it. Look at your 4 Ps, look at your market segmentation and so on. Break down that section in a way that it becomes very persuasive to someone who's financing your plan or who is, or a boss, whoever it is that you're doing this for, so that you can persuade them that you really have it together on that. So competitive analysis, we're looking at the competition, right? What makes or breaks your company's success in a country? And so we explore and research the track record of other companies already located in the country, evaluate reasons that other companies are successful in that country, right? How are you going to break in there? Who are your competition? What are your opportunities to take advantage of that? All right, then we have the human resource section on HR. So look at that HR management video, and not only will it tell you a lot about HR strategy, but also about those components that would be relevant to your plan. So in the human resources section, the kinds of things that I'm looking for. What's your global operations strategy? Are you ethnocentric, polycentric, geocentric? I want you to anticipate any possible organizational cultural issues, cultural challenges operating within your area. If you're going to go purchase a company, right? You're going to do an acquisition. How's that going to affect company culture, right? That would be a big question for yours, for example. Does this country have the same work ethic? What's the skill level of the workforce? Do they need local or expatriate managers? This is another thing sometimes that people just sort of like skim over sometimes. It's like, where are you getting your managers, right? And we talked about different strategies on management. So again, you can go back, look at the video if you want to remember some of those things. Personnel plan, right? We're getting into the nuts and bolts of the HR operation here at this point. You should be addressing local staffing issues, minimum wage, unemployment rate, mandated holidays, salary requirements, then determine your actual staffing requirements, right? How many shifts, number of store managers, number of staff to be hired. And this is helpful for you because when you get into that finance section, then you're able to itemize those workers and say, okay, I've got 2 managers and there's the salary of the 2 managers, right? I've got X number of employees doing whatever the category is, right? And then you stick in the numbers for them too. And then that makes it so that your plan is consistent with whatever your expenses are. So that helps. That helps put things together. And then we have the financial plan. Intimidated by the financial plan, go check out that video. Hopefully it sets your mind at ease a little bit. There's a lot of art and science behind trying to make a financial plan something that's persuasive and that's really going to work. But I do think there's some good tips in that video that might be able to help you out as well. There should be a spreadsheet with 3 tabs: startup costs, cost revenue analysis, break-even analysis. And then of course there is the narrative. And the narrative is important because this is your opportunity to tell me things like, I'm paying this person X amount per hour, and here's how I got that number. Maybe I did some research and I found out that this is the minimum wage in that area, or that people in this industry gets this, or I'm assuming purchasing power parity based on American labor numbers, or whatever, right? However it is that you guessed at that, and as I've said before, there's a lot of guessing in this. Explain to me how you guessed. How'd you get these answers? Defend what you did. And so that's why the narrative is important. It's not just a recap of I'm spending this much on this much and this much on this thing, right? It's a specific rundown of this was my thinking process. So this is why I can be reasonably sure that over this period of time, this is how much money we think we can make. Then we've got export-import strategy and supply chain issues. Again, I think it makes sense to sort of put these things together. So, you want to identify a potential supplier, distributor, local agent in the target country, right? Somebody who can help make that trade happen, whatever that trade may be. Key shipping and export-import factors involved for your company and your target country. I'm thinking about, tariffs, I'm thinking about legalities, whatever it takes to sort of get stuff around. How and where you'll source supplies, right? Within the company, from foreign suppliers. Are you going to locally source things? Are you going to follow a make or buy strategy? These are the kinds of things that I think are relevant to determining, what you're going to need to bring from someplace else versus what it is that you already have that you can take advantage of. Include an explanation of the anticipated supply chain and potential challenges you expect. Again, this can be kind of high-level stuff. I don't expect this shipping lane and this kind of thing, right? You can be a little more general. Address infrastructure challenges in your target country. Labor strikes, internet access, lack of highways or frequent traffic jams, inconsistent utility supplies, electrical outages, water shortages. These are all things that are typically supply chain associated issues as opposed to import-export issues. All of these are sort of more broadly supply chain anyway, right? How are we going to get stuff from point A to point B? How do we connect all that up? I think being as specific as you can is good, but I also there's a level of specificity, but then there's also too much, right? So I don't expect a tracking of every item in your inventory to figure out where it's going to, where it's going from, what all the details are going to be like that. But I do think it's reasonable to find out, okay, so what kinds of brokers, for example, handle this kind of business in this country? I mean, I don't think that's a reasonable amount of research to sort of say, hey, if I were to go do this, then this is somebody that I could go to do this for me. And then I'm going to trust that there's certain aspects that broker is going to do for you that you don't necessarily have to write about, right? It's like, I know a guy, this is the guy, right? And we don't have to go totally in the weeds on this. convince whoever the reader is of your report, of your proposal, that you know what you're doing, that you have a plan for some of these things. And particularly on export-import, there's a video on that and kind of explain to you how you can approach that section. Then we come to ethics, sustainability, and CSR. These are the things we're looking for. Reference theories of ethical analysis, that is, there should be, some way of analyzing the validity of your ethical approach. And so a justice orientation, a rights orientation, a utilitarianism orientation, these are all different ways that people justify their ethical approach. And then develop an ethical code, a sustainability plan, and or corporate social responsibility strategy for your company. UN sustainability goals encompass far more than environmentalism, but loads of things, human rights and poverty and access to water and all sorts of stuff. You don't have to address every element of the UN's goals toward sustainability, right? But it is a good place to look for, like if you're trying to say, hey, this is going to be part of my CSR approach, CSR policy, then you can say, hey, here's an aspect of sustainability that we think is really important, that's relevant to our company, and so this is where we're going to go with that. Maybe it's clean water. Right? It could be lots of things. So a lot of companies already have those things in place. If yours does, you can refer to it, kind of maybe selectively talk about it. But there may be some other things that you want to think about too. Like if I'm doing a franchise, do I need to include some clauses in a contract that, say for example, says that our environmental policy is going to be like American laws. We're going to treat our laborers in a similar way to the way we treat people in the United States, or according to, sure, here's the minimum legal thing, but we're going to bring it up to here, or whatever. Whatever that is, you ought to specify that and start thinking about like how can you make that happen. It's one thing to sort of say, oh yeah, well this is our policy, this is what we're going to do. It's another thing to say, all right, well, how can we get the people on the ground to do the thing that we hope that they're going to do. Then, basically last couple of things, final recommendations and conclusion. That should just be pretty straightforward, right? It's kind of like what we were saying in the executive summary. This is what we think should happen. We recommend that this company should go into this place. Sort of your final words. If there's any final bits of action, like things maybe that your report didn't address, but you think that maybe they need to still be addressed, some remaining things, it's probably good to include those things there. And then of course, your work cited at the end. By watching this video, you've either taken your first steps, or maybe your last steps, toward putting together a global business plan. Check out all those steps, be as thorough as you can, but keep in mind that there are still more resources, other things that I can offer you as far as videos, as far as filling in some of those blanks. So please check those out. I wish you all the best in your entrepreneurial pursuits. Best of luck, and I'll see you next time.